If someone was to ask me what is my favourite era of Doctor Who, it would be the Patrick Troughton Second Doctor era. It's true, it's not really connected to my nostalgia. That comes more to the 9th and 4th Doctor era. But over time, I have had a growing appreciation for not just Doctor Who black and white television, but just black and white television in general. And throughout the years, I can say that the Patrick Troughton Second Doctor era is my favourite era of the show. So this installment of ranking the Doctor's stories worst to best is probably going to be my favourite to do. I can tell you that a lot of these stories I rate very highly. So compare this to the first Doctor ranking video, a lot more of the stories are rated higher. But that doesn't mean we have some, let's say, stinkers in the list, some that just go, some stories which I don't particularly care about too much. There are some in the Patrick Troughton era. It's not a flawless era by any means. I will say no Doctor Who era is flawless. That in itself would be almost impossible to achieve. So yes, I will be ranking the Second Doctor era from worst to best as a tier list. So if you've seen the previous ranking video, you know exactly how it's going to be done, ranking them from worst to best. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ranking of the Second Doctor era, worst to best. So, if I was to say, what is the weakest, the worst Second Doctor story, there's probably one story that your mind is going to straight away. You might say, is it the Dominators? Is it the Krotons? The Highlanders? Underwater Menace? The Wheel in Space? It's named, what I like to call it, the Dark Horse of the Doctor Who era. It's of course, it's the Space Pirates. Yep, it is the Dark Horse of the Second Doctor era. I think hating the story has become a bit of a meme, that it's boring, and that the TARDIS team barely feature in the story, and it was only made to bridge the gap of the budget to make way for the War Games. A filler episode that looks nothing but an empty void of nothing. And I would say that's the best description I could say to describe the Space Pirates. An empty void of nothing. Robert Holmes is such a legendary writer, you can't believe he wrote something so shit. If it existed, of course it would benefit. It would help. But I would still say that it would, for me, be the weakest Second Doctor story. Even if it existed, I can say that pretty confidently. So there are space pirates who are targeting these beacons for a special type of metal. And the space team are trying to track down these pirates, and it's insinuated that the corruption is inside their own company, that's or organisation, which is causing this. This story really perplexes me. The Doctor and the TARDIS team, Dr. Jamie and Zoe, they not only barely feature in this story, but it's almost like they have, whatever they do has no involvement or affects the plot in any way, shape or form. Focus is on the space team. And the space team you see in the story who take the limelight, they don't interact with the main characters. So how can you even form any form of emotional connection or relationship with these characters? They're blank, boring pieces of cardboard, and it's like watching paint dry on the wall. Beacons are being destroyed one by one to collect this precious metal. The TARDIS team appears about 15 minutes when episode 1 tries to establish the plot. No way that the Space Pirates needed to be a 6-parter of pirates targeting beacons. So the second half of episode, or actually 3/4 of the way through episode 1 and episode 2, the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe are trapped on Alpha 1 when it explodes. And let me tell you something I did with this story on Dailymotion. I watched it on 1.5% speed because I really felt like I was wasting my time watching this story. I can sum up the Space Pirates in literally a couple of bullet points and you don't need to watch it. Point 1. The pirates are destroying beacons for a metal called Argonoid. The TARDIS team are trapped on the beacon to be saved by Clancy, who is extremely grating to the ear. They are flying to the planet Tar, where they are ambushed by pirates and yet again saved by Clancy. The TARDIS team are locked up yet again and trapped. And who saves them? Clancy. Next point. They are locked up and trapped yet again. Then it's about defusing a bomb. And that's it. 6 parts for that. This is the most onerous story I have probably ever experienced. Is it the worst Doctor Who story ever? No. My mind goes... It's not like Time Flight or Ledger Hive, which wants me to gouge my eyes out. They're that bad. Those stories, I would say, for the years it's been, categorically hate. This is just an empty void of nothing. That is the Space Pirates to me. Not to put shame whatsoever if people like this story or not. That's opinions at the end of the day. But the Space Pirates, I really wanted to just be done with it. I will never watch the Space Pirates ever again. The only exception is if it's miraculously found. What a lazy ending. I know it was pre-recorded because the War Games was interfering with it, but flippin' hell, what a lazy ending. Space Pirates is by far the worst Second Doctor story at number 21. What's the most famous thing you think of the Second Doctor era? That would be Cybermen. The Second Doctor era is the golden age of Cybermen stories. Nothing will ever compete with them in my opinion, and they really need to look back of what made the Cybermen just so good. And what they're truly about. In my opinion, of course. Some people might disagree, but I think space horror just works with them. However, then we have The Wheel in Space. Yeah, this is really a stinker to, well, I wouldn't say I hate the story in any way. It's just extremely convoluted. And then when you look back with the Moonbase, a classic Base Enter Siege space horror story, the awakening of an ancient evil with the Tomb of the Cybermen, regarded as some of the best depictions of the Cybermen. Even the 8-part epic The Invasion, although I can have a point of contention that was more Tobias Vaughan stealing the show. And then we have the Under the Radar one, and it's not particularly respected. The Wheel in Space isn't respected at all. It's average in delivery. The Doctor and Jamie land on a deserted spaceship heading towards the Wheel. The spaceship has a worker robot on board, hostile towards them, and the supporting characters on the Wheel are introduced very late into the episode, and again, like the Space Pirates, you don't really form any form of connection with them. Even Zoe as well. But that's kind of her character. She's more of the logic over emotion kind of person. The first 3 episodes doesn't actually establish nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Cybermen take quite a while. They're revealed in big, massive balloons who were on the abandoned spaceship. And they want something to do with the wheel. Again, it feels like this could be done as such a basic premise, but then they just made it so convoluted for the sake of it. I mean, for a Cyberman story, it blows my mind how bad, how it's just not on par with the others. It's kind of depressing. It's supposed to be the golden age of the Cybermen, and then we just have the wheel in space. Story is stagnant. There's no progression. Jamie covers for the Doctor by playing dumb, essentially. It doesn't really work out. I don't think he's actually written very well in the story. Zoe is okay in her introduction. Does insult Jamie somewhat, like dressing like a girl because of the whole Scottish attire. The Cybermen's design, which I'll touch on about, I quite like them. I consider them underrated. Their voices, not so much. Sometimes I can barely understand what they're saying. I need the subtitles. Yeah, the story is a convoluted disaster. It's a slog episode because it takes so damn long to get any progression, and when it does progress, you don't care, and it's just so needlessly convoluted. The conclusion, how they defeat the Cybermen, is very naff. And compared to the other Cybermen stories, it's one you can easily skip. Right. The Underwater Menace. I am surprised. So much faffing around with this DVD, so much pain in the ass faffing around and waiting for that. Delayed, cancelled numerous times, revived, then to say to us the animation is ceased. And now we have reconstruction. And I can tell straight away that this reconstruction was done in a rush. It's the Underwater Menace. Yeah, it doesn't help that the reconstruction is god awful. It's the most laziest, lackadaisical thing I have ever seen put together in a DVD release. Just trash. But anyway, we're not here to roast the DVD. We are here to review the story. I've already roasted it back in the day, so you can watch it if you want. But what about me? The Underwater Menace is rated quite low at number 19. Yeah, season 4, it took a little bit until it adjusted for the Second Doctor. I found him sometimes in power, the Highlanders and the Underwater Menace, less so power. The Doctor's characterization was a bit all over the place. It wasn't very consistent. They didn't really know how to perform the character. It went a little bit too, out of the box, I think, in my opinion. Thank goodness they got rid of that stupid hat. Has my opinions changed to the Underwater Menace? No, it is not. It's still a pretty... It's definitely the weakest season 4 story by an absolute margin. So yeah, the Doctor, along with Ben, Polly and Jamie, land in the 1970s and enter a cave that leads to the city of Atlantis. We meet a crazy cult who worship the plan of the city to be raised from the depths by a madman called Zaroff, an insane scientist who isn't telling the full story but wants to commit the destruction of the world, who say it's a scientist's dream of supreme power. Episode 1 and 3 I consider average at best. Not terrible, but average. If you believe the fish people are the villains in this story, nope, they actually barely feature in the story. And their involvement, it's very limited besides what I can remember of staging a revolution to stop food supply. Zaroff, the villain, the actor himself, he was a bit iffy. Stuttered over his lines quite a lot. Of course, you have the classic ending cliffhanger to episode 3, which is funny that we have, but his second attempt, which was used in episode 4, oh, that was shockingly bad. Polly 100% got the short end of the stick with this story. Kind of feel bad about Annika Will. She was kind of upset that she was reduced to a damsel in distress for many of the stories. I honestly agree what Innes Lloyd says about the Underwater Menace. It's very B-movie like. You compare this to Power of the Daleks and the Moonbase, like, what the hell is this? Yeah, that's number 19, The Underwater Menace. Alright, we're finally out of what I consider the bad Doctor Who Second Doctor stories. I think the Underwater Menace, the Wheel in Space, and the Space Pirates you can easily skip. They're not really worth your time. If you're a collector, then by all means, or you're in a marathon, I will not stop you. But yeah, now we're getting to just above average now. Not quite there in like the granddaddy, of course, and the excellent Second Doctor stories. We're not there just yet. Yeah, at number 18, it's the Highlanders. The only notable thing I can say about the Highlanders, for me, is that it introduces Jamie McCrimmon, who wasn't originally going to be the next companion in the TARDIS team, but they liked Fraser Hines so much that they wanted to include him in the story. That's where you can probably see where some of the stories in season 4, Jamie didn't have a lot to do because they couldn't be bothered to change the scripts. You might have noticed that in the Moonbase and parts of the Underwater Menace. I'm quite surprised to say I enjoyed the opening episode. The Dr. Ben and Polly land in the Battle of Culloden in Scotland. The Second Doctor and the companions are ambushed by fleeing Jacobites, and to get their freedom they need to aid a wounded man. Episode 1 doesn't particularly give you any idea of the main supporting characters who have a notable role, like Jamie McCrimmon and Alexander, who are highlighted on the cover, especially the Target novelization. They aren't actually main characters, main supporting characters. They don't have too much to do or screen time. It's a very get captured back and forward story. Get ambushed by Jacobites, captured by the Redcoats. Their execution has been thwarted and the companions eventually split up to divide the story. Two villains, being Trask and Solicitor Grey, are passable adversaries, with Grey a crooked solicitor who sells prisoners and transports them, and Polly and Christie use blackmail to attempt to get the Doctor. So Polly actually gets stuff to do in this story, and it's quite shocking. She blackmails an individual to help the Doctor. Finally, she's doing something than being a damsel in distress. The Doctor uses his wit and cunning tactics to escape, and Ben and Jamie, our prisoners, are being held on board the Annabelle, facing the ruthless man Trask. Yeah, one of the biggest points of contention with the Highlanders is I don't actually like the Second Doctor in this story. I don't like Patrick Troughton in this story, my favourite actor. Oh, shock horror. They didn't know what to do with him. It's like almost having an identity crisis. I just didn't like how he was written in this story. Nothing to do with Patrick Troughton, of course. It was how he was written. It was like they didn't know what to do with him. The Moonbase 100% rectified the problem and actually made the Second Doctor have a consistent personality. With the Highlanders, there was an identity crisis. They just didn't know what to do with it. I can sympathise with it because they're changing the entire character of the Doctor. So they were trying to experiment. I just don't think the experimentation just wasn't very good. The Highlanders really reminds me of the style of the Reign of Terror. Quite political, showing corruption in some parts, but I don't really like the Reign of Terror that much. And I don't really like the Highlanders. They're just D tier 6 out of 10 stories. They're just not my type of story. Ian Stewart Black, Innes Lloyd, they knew that the pure historical stories was just a dying breed that just doesn't work anymore or grabs the attention of the viewers. They noticed that it was not working anymore, and the formula, it was dead really. And it only really works for the First Doctor. That's something famous for the First Doctor era, and it just didn't really translate very well. I mean, the gunfighters and the smugglers were not very well appreciated back in the day. So they knew it was a dying formula and it needed the can. And it would be a while, all the way until Black Orchid with Peter Davison being the next pure historical. And I think personally that was the right move to make. It was a dying formula. Number 17 on the list is the last story in the D tier, and then we're just moving up to C tier and then just get into some unbelievable classics. But number 17, it's the Krotons by, you guessed it, Robert Holmes. Robert Holmes' introduction story, along with the Space Pirates, not the golden age of his writing, doesn't compare to any of his Third Doctor stories. So we have a rather peculiar story in Season 6, which is just simply there. Not amazing, but not bad either. That's how I would put the Krotons. In my opinion, the less recognised Season 6 story. Granted, I would say the Space Pirates is more notable than the Krotons because that has more of a infamous presence to it. Everyone kind of knows the Space Pirates. It's a meme, but it's bad. The Krotons is just basically there. Though you can probably say the Dominators might pick that spot as well. That's really debatable and subjective. But the Krotons, to me, in my opinion, is probably the less notable story out of Season 6. Maybe the entire era. The Krotons is a 4-part story with a society of intelligent individuals. 2 of the best students are picked by the Krotons to enter the machine, only to be disposed of. Which is it's kind of ironic, because they're an intelligent species, but they very blindly followed the Krotons, who kind of trapped them in a self-perpetuated slavery by offering their technology and history and about the universe and science, but they were completely oblivious, not all of them, oblivious to their own self-perpetuated slavery. The Krotons themselves, they are literally walking trash bins. They are absolutely ridiculous. Their voices are cool. They've been depicted in extended media pretty shockingly well, which is crazy. But, and I'm talking about the BBC books, mind you, you obviously know what I'm alluding to. But here, they are just walking trash bins. For a 4-parter, to be honest, it kind of drags a bit. It's not the best paced story, which is quite a negative statement, especially when there is so many other stories in Season 6 which are longer. I don't think the War Games drags. I don't think Seeds of Death drags that much. The Mine Robber, the Dominators, the Invasion, I don't find them to drag. But this little 4-parter, squeezed pretty much in the middle of Season 6, yeah, it kind of has some pacing issues. Even though the Gons, the society, were being enslaved for thousands of years by the Krotons, you don't really feel for them that much. I gotta be honest, they're kind of blank canvases. They're not the most engaging supporting characters. And their ramblings and infighting between the society and their leaders, you just don't have a care in the world, which is just not a good look for a story. Yeah, it's an okay, just above average Doctor Who story. No, by no means one of the greatest Second Doctor stories. Number 17, The Krotons. A pretty decent Second Doctor story, and with a very famous villain from the era, the Ice Warriors, being the Ice Warriors from Season 5. Like the Abominable Snowmen and the Wheel in Space, they are kind of brushed to the side a little bit when it comes to Season 5. It has a very similar formula to the Moonbase, very similar in fact, they can almost be parallel, but the Moonbase just does it far better. The TARDIS arrives on Earth in a new ice age. The Travellers make their way into a base where scientists commanded by leader Klent are using an ionizer device to combat the advance of a glacier. And they find giant ice warriors buried within the ice. Very cool premise, but they find the ice warriors in ice. And also, that is a cool premise to introduce a new villain. The scientist realizes that the continued use of the ionizer could make the ship's engines explode. Their computer is unable to advise them. Without more information, the disaster seems imminent. Yes, Commander Klent is very untrusting of human beings, other people, and puts a lot of faith in an artificial intelligence performing the calculations, and just trusts none of his staff. Episode 1 is very heavy on dialogue. It does take quite a bit to actually establish what I just previously explained with the ionizer, so it's very dialogue heavy to actually move the plot along of why the ionizer is an important piece of machinery. But I love the Ice Warriors weaponry, a big burst of sound which it's been depicted that it explodes the brain, which is just terrifying in context. This story is a little bit too heavy on dialogue, and it just takes a little bit too long for the Ice Warriors to actually what they're trying to achieve. And I don't think it's the best plot. The Seeds of Death is a much better Ice Warrior story. I can say that without a shadow of a doubt. Then again, I might go off my placement of saying it's overrated because it doesn't compare to the Titan Season 5 stories. Though Penley was my favourite supporting character, of course, voiced Wallace from Wallace and Gromit. He was the standout. But besides him, it's a very dialogue heavy story, and it's a C tier story at 7 out of 10. I did have a number of guilty pleasures with Doctor Who. One of them was the Keys of Marinus, but when I returned to it years later, I'm starting to see its flaws and they started to irritate me. And it wasn't very a good story. But one story has yet to change. It is not a liked episode from the Second Doctor era. I personally consider it very underrated. Is it flawed? My goodness, it is. It's extremely flawed. Sometimes it's unbelievably stupid. But I really enjoy it. It's the Dominators. This is my ultimate guilty pleasure story. After all these years of returning to it, I still like it. I give it a more reasonable rating. Something tells me back in the day I rated this a 9. I was daft and stupid to rate it a 9. It isn't a 9 out of 10 story, it's a 7.5 out of 10. So I'm a little bit more realistic with the rating. But I still like it. It's fun, it's enjoyable, and it works surprisingly well for a 5-part episode. 6-part, that could be a stretch. It would probably have some pacing issues, but I enjoy it. It's an underrated gem. Straight out of the gate, we land on this desolate planet. Navigator Rago and Toba are immediately bitching at each other about how they want to go with their plans. These two bitch at each other more than a damn married couple. They are insatiable when it comes to their bitchiness to each other. It's almost comical. It feels stupid, it really does. With the war games, with Security Chief and the War Chief, it feels more real because there's underlying emotions in there why they hate each other. With the Dominators, they're just bitching each other just for the sake of bitching each other. It's so comical, it's ridiculous. The Quarks are another ridiculous element, but surprisingly extremely overpowered. They explode buildings. They are extremely destructive in their weaponry. It's like, whoa. I can see how they tried to replace them with the Daleks, but for one, their voices aren't correct. They walk really funny, and they just can't replace the Daleks. I don't know what they had in their mind that they could rival the Daleks, because they just don't. But they are freaking overpowered for the sake of it. The Dulcians are a very gentle and peaceful race, which begs the question of why the Doctor's like contemplating, why is it turned into a worn-torn planet? They've never used weaponry before. Why is it so desolate and bleak? And why are they on this island called the Island of Death? There are many aspects of the story where it's very back and forward, like to the Dulcian city. First the Doctor and Jamie are there, then it's Zoe, then back and forward. It can have the tendency to go back and forward. But this story has the worst plot hole, or should I say the funniest plot hole in any Doctor Who story ever. So Toba and Roga, along with the companions, are in the museum sector. They see a laser gun and they fire it. One of the Dominators does, which I think is Rago. Now, Toba says, "Can we destroy them?" Raga goes, "No, we must conserve power." But he is literally holding a laser gun, but doesn't require power. It's self-sufficient. My God, he is literally holding a gun right at them. And he then simply puts it down and turns their back on the Doctor and Jamie. These Dominators are stupid. They are so dumb. It is the dumbest plot hole I have watched in Doctor Who history. It's hilarious. And that is them through the entire story. Toba, "Can we destroy them?" Rago, "No, conserve power." And then Rago goes on to waste Dominator power by using the Quarks to destroy people. He is the biggest hypocrite of all time. Now, you could probably say I am roasting this story to pieces, but I find it funny. I enjoy it. Maybe I'm laughing at it, presumably, but I enjoy it. It's so stupid in some places, but if you enjoy a story, you enjoy a story. Some people in my comments probably like the Space Pirates. They probably like the Krotons. I like the Dominators. Moving on. Definitely the most out-of-the-box, interesting Second Doctor story, full of unpredictability. You can't really predict it in some fashions, and in others you can, which I'll get to in a minute. It's not my favourite Second Doctor story, but I appreciate it for what it is. It's very eerie, and a very interesting story. It's The Mind Robber, and an 8 out of 10. Yeah, definitely the most interesting, unorthodox, out of the formula Second Doctor story. What do you think of Second Doctor stories? Earthbound, kind of in a prototype stage, which leads into the Third Doctor era. Base Under Siege. That's what you think of with the Second Doctor era. Not really this. This is unorthodox. Not in its formula. Which I appreciate. I 100% appreciate it. Sometimes a point of contention with the Second Doctor here, some people might find it formulaic. I don't, because I think it's a good formula. It's very Celestial Toymaker in its themes, which does beg the question, because there was going to be a sort of a sequel to the Celestial Toymaker in the Second Doctor era. So you very much get that vibe from this story, just how the land of fiction it's been presented. But episode 1, it's all based in the TARDIS. It goes to show how they can make a very creepy introduction with hardly no budget. They used, a white blank canvas for the outside of the land of fiction. Robots which appeared in another sci-fi show, because I recognise them somewhere. And just based in the TARDIS. It works, and it's pretty creepy. Especially with this loud, roaring, almost sounds like tinnitus in the ears, slowly affecting the TARDIS team, which the Doctor says is too powerful and they can't even control, and they can't fight it off. What a good introduction. Jamie is absent for a stage of the Mind Robber, and why not replace him by messing up his portrait to get him back? That is such a genius move only the Mind Robber could achieve. Because if it's any other story in the Second Doctor formula, you would just basically be absent, or just pretending he's there in the distance. That's what they would do. In the Mind Robber, it works, and it's comical, and it's fun. Now, it's definitely very unpredictable in its settings, what foes you're going to be experiencing. That's all well and good. How they deal with the foes becomes predictable. They just simply say it doesn't exist, so any feeling of tension and horror and apprehension with the TARDIS team, I don't really feel it, because it's too easy to deal with adversaries within the land of fiction. You just say it doesn't exist. So I don't like how easy foes are removed and dealt with. But episode 5 is beyond my favourite. There's still some fun moments in the story. Toy soldiers walking around, Medusa, a Minotaur, the Doctor and Zoe getting squished by a book being closed by robots. I think the Master Brain and the person who's being controlled by the Master Brain, I don't say it's not a villain, which the hype to build up to this villain didn't really feel warranted, in my opinion, but I wouldn't say it's overrated, but it's just not my personal favourite Second Doctor story. Still a lot of fun, very unpredictable in its settings, and It's a very interesting watch on your first experience, definitely, because you can't really predict what corner and what action it's going to take. Very unpredictable in that fashion, and a very good story. 8 out of 10, The Mind Robber. Number 13, underrated. 100% underrated. However, its sister story is 100% better than the original. 100%. It's still an underrated Second Doctor story from Season 5. It's the Abominable Snowmen. Abominable Snowmen is heavily overshadowed by the Web of Fear. Even when the majority of the Web of Fear was missing. And now that's even more the case when the DVD came out. Now with the release of the animation of the Abominable Snowmen, I can still say that it gets heavily overshadowed by the Abominable Snowmen. It's 100% depicted right here in this pole that it's left in the dirt almost. It's kind of sad, it is, because I think it's a truly underrated Second Doctor story, but it just doesn't compare to the Web of Fear. It just doesn't. On audio and reconstruction, I seriously struggled with the Abominable Snowmen. It was just one of those stories where I go, nope, I can't do it. I can't get into it. And that's a shame, that is. That truly is a shame. But when the animation came out, I said to myself, thank goodness that this story was animated, because I think it's very good, and I clearly misjudged it. The setup is quite interesting. They land in Tibet, in the Himalayas, the Death Sen temple below them. The Doctor goes for a walk first, and states there's no danger, but wants to go alone anyway. Without a lot of reasoning why, and being ambiguous and rather vague and not really revealing answers. Second Doctor almost acting like the Seventh Doctor there almost. The Doctor is accused of murdering Travis's companion, who are on an expedition to find the Yeti. Travis is irate, almost that the Doctor is a rival, a journalist looking for a cheap headline to expose Travis's as a madman on a useless expedition for something that doesn't exist. The animation itself is very open, almost a little janky, but it's good. My favourite will always be the Moonbase. That's just the best animation I've ever experienced. Doesn't compare to the Moonbase, but it's still good. It's still good. We are introduced with the Great Intelligence. Now this is a point where I prefer something in the Abominable Snowmen than the Web of Fear. It's the Great Intelligence, shockingly enough. He is unbelievably creepy. He's controlling someone called Padma Salvazar. Hopefully I'm saying his name right. Who is he's hundreds of years old. And the Great Intelligence refuses to let go its will over Padma. I'm just going to say Padma for short. Which you feel so much sympathy for this man. Who you eventually find out that there's two different voices happening. One that sounds a lot like Padma, which is still extremely eerie. And the other being 100% the Great Intelligence speaking. Because when the Great Intelligence is speaking through Padma, has a very calm, very kind tone, but it's this very eerie false sense of security which just, it gets under your skin, and you just don't get that. It's still creepy, mind you. You just don't get that with the Web of Fear. Saying that the Doctor is our friend, speaking through Victoria, you see how the Intelligence has total control and influence over its victims. And some scenes were really well depicted, like Padma or the Intelligence moving the Yeti on a chessboard, which is just a which references the fact that it's in complete control and influencing Detson. It's a bit long-winded in some places, but it's an underrated story, and I'm happy to say that it is a good story. It just doesn't compare to the Web of Fear.
Have you ever thought what it's like to be wanderers in the fourth dimension? To be exiles?
For many, the best Ice Warrior story in the Doctor Who TV run is The Seeds of Death, and I can 100% say that that is the case for me. The Seeds of Death is the best Ice Warrior story we have so far. In a few ways, it's structured quite similar to the Ice Warriors. I would say the idea of the Ice Warriors being revealed, being frozen in ice, is a cooler concept. But how they did it in The Seeds of Death is yet again brilliant and some fantastic direction. And the direction by Michael Ferguson, I think it's a splendid. I love this slow but very well-paced reveal that they do with the Ice Warriors, more specifically Slar, or the Ice Leader. First, it's revealed that his perception is the camera itself. We don't reveal his face, and then we have the face reveal at the end. It's a good reveal to build up the main Ice Warrior leader and main adversary of the story. The direction by Michael Ferguson was really, really good. The plot of The Seeds of Death is space travel has been abandoned. Mankind has been totally dependent on TMAT technology for everything. Logistics, food, medicine, the lot. The system is breaking down, and it will plunge the world into a freeze of logistics. And this will put enormous pressure on the team and the world. The Ice Warriors want to use TMAT to plunge the world in a fungus, which will starve its victims of oxygen. Right from the gate, it's a much more interesting and scary premise than the original Ice Warrior story. Dare I say it, it's a little bit padded in like episode 3 and 4, but not as much as the original story. See, like the first half after like episode 2 and episode 3, it's kind of slow. It's more attempting to thwart the Ice Warriors in taking over TMAT and getting rid of Ice Warriors one by one. The Ice Warriors are using pods of fungus and will take over the planet and send them by the use of TMAT. You definitely feel a lot of apprehension and tension within the story, and the Ice Warriors for a moment are successful of plunging parts of the world with fungus. There are moments where the Ice Warriors are actually succeeding in their plans, and the Doctor is like 7th Doctor stuff here. He exterminates the whole Ice Warrior fleet. Would you go, this is like 7th Doctor territory here, and his reasoning was they were a threat to the world, and Slar is almost like having a panic attack over it. I don't hear that moment talked about too much in the Second Doctor era, but it's one of my favourite moments and one of the most darkest moments in the Second Doctor era. It just like surprises me a little bit, but wow. Doctor's going that far, it's like pretty dark. Issues where the story can be a little bit stagnant with the plot. But overall, it's the best Ice Warrior story so far. I don't think anything will really beat it. Number 11 on the list, we're almost at the top 10. Some people absolutely adore this story, say it is one of the best Patrick Troughton episodes. I think I did think that back in the day. I don't rate it as highly anymore. I think it's got a few issues, but it's still a really good mystery type story, Earthbound mystery story. It's the Faceless Ones at number 11. This is kind of a personal choice that I would love to see recovered in the archives, the full thing, because it's a really good Earthbound mystery story. It feels like it's a prototype of what is to come in the Third Doctor era almost, especially like season 5. The Doctor, Ben, Polly and Jamie land in 1966 Gatwick Airport. They scatter to evade a policeman and Polly ends up in the Chameleon Tour's hammer. Polly witnesses the death of a man taking an envelope and is killed by an airport captain with an alien ray gun, electrocuting the man and left with scorch marks. We know that Chameleon Tours and this operation has been happening for quite some time under secrecy for a particular goal. The Doctor and Jamie attempt to warn airport security to no avail, and episode 1 has a very creepy cliffhanger. Yeah, one of my favourite cliffhangers from the Second Doctor era. It's just creepy. And episode 2 and onwards divides the companions doing their own thing. Jamie's keeping an eye on Chameleon Tours. Something has happened to Polly, who she has been attacked by Chameleon Tours and the Chameleons, which puts more pressure on the Doctor and Jamie to tell their story. And Ben pretty much disappears. There's a lot of things happen to the main cast here, which puts enormous pressure on actually beating the foe, because the Doctor is pretty much left on his own at one point. But when Ben and Polly are dealt with by the Chameleons, they disappear for far too long, and then we get them back when it's their departure scene. I just think that wasn't good how they utilised them. So Samantha basically replaces their involvement. She was originally going to be the next companion. It ended up being Victoria Waterfield. Episode 1 to 4 is just like fantastic. It's super good mystery storytelling. If you love mystery alien stories, this is the one for you. However, because of episode 5 and 6, it knocks it off being a 9 out of 10 and gets an 8.5 out of 10 instead. I really don't like the resolution to this story. I think how the Chameleons act afterwards when the Doctor intervenes with their plans in episode 5 and 6. The Chameleons call each other incompetent, and they describe themselves to be the most intelligent alien race, but flipping out they do bicker amongst each other and call their own leadership incompetent. We witnessed the main enemy called the Director, but his build-up wasn't very good and it just wasn't a good adversary. They were trying to build him up as the adversary because he is the one who planned the whole thing of stealing ignorant teenagers basically to them, and they completely vanish off the flights. But it didn't feel like he added really anything to the story, so I'm saying to myself, why was he included in the first place? We could have just have Captain Blade as the main adversary and that's it. I just don't like how they resolved the whole thing and the Chameleons go, oh, alright, maybe it was kind of bad, so we're gonna go now, bye. I don't like it. I don't like the ending. It's just... lazy is the wrong word. It's just it's just like the direction of the ending. It's just something I just find a little just not to my liking. I like something a little bit more gravitas, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's not my cup of tea, the resolution of this story. But it does lead into Evil the Daleks with the TARDIS being stolen. So that was number 11, The Faceless Ones. A brilliant Earthbound story. It's not perfect, but it's a very good story. Now we're moving into the A's here. Now these are the big boys. Now 10 Patrick Troughton episodes, Second Doctor stories, which in my opinion are unbelievable classics. All 10 of them. stories, but it worked surprisingly well on audio because it's atmospheric. And it's one of the few stories to actually make me uncomfortable for a reason. To make me generally uncomfortable. It's the Macra Terror. The consensus of the Macra Terror is kind of all over the place. Some people like it, some people don't really care about it, some people love it. I'm on the side that I actually love it. Now, what is that one point where I say the Macra Terror made me uncomfortable? It's not the monsters themselves, the Macra. It's the themes of the story of totalitarianism and an autocracy. A society and people being controlled coercively, and you have this big monitor that says you will be happy doing this and that, and using words like jolly, happy, prosper and privileges, everyone dancing, but it's all a facade. Things like that just generally just creep me out. But yeah, the idea of people being happy, being fun, and living in a utopian version of the world where we all care about you, your safety matters, it's for your own good, but the underlying secrets is authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and coercive control of the individual who has no individual value besides only as a method of production for a collective goal organised by a centralised power and ideology. Yeah, that freaks me out. And the Macra are the representation of that. They're disgusting crabs living in their secret little hideout. You generally feel sorry for some of the civilians in the society, like Medoc, for example. You generally sympathise how he's feeling, because even though he knows exactly what's going on, to everyone else he is just an outsider, a rebel, a dissolute, and a betrayer of his society. And he is going to get killed and punished or re-educated because he knows the truth. And that's where Ben is utilised very well in this story, that he is controlled by this gas, which makes him appreciate and love the society. Yeah, it's one of the few Doctor Who stories to generally make me shiver in my skin. But that's mainly due to totalitarianism. Anything like that, dystopian stuff like Brave New World, 1984, the Macra Terror, and yeah, the Macra Terror does it really well. Really, really well. The Macra themselves, on the actual existing episodes, they look a little ridiculous, of course, but the animation completely overblows them, over-exaggerates them. But the themes is what makes me shiver of the Macra Terror and why I personally love the story. At the end of the day, I love reading dystopian stuff. So, naturally, I love the Macra Terror at number 10. Arguably the most famous Second Doctor site, maybe even the most famous Second Doctor story of all time. It was big news when it was recovered in Hong Kong. Tomb of the Cybermen is simply a classic. Everyone needs to watch it. If it's your first Doctor Who story to introduce you to the black and white era, a successful formula of being based under siege, amazing characters, good dialogue, all exist in episodes. Which is sad because this is the first Doctor Who Second Doctor story chronologically that all the episodes exist. That's very sad. Episode 1 actually similarly sets up like a first Doctor story, establishing the atmosphere first. So the Doctor Victoria and Jamie land on Telos and bump into an expedition who are trying to find the final remains of the Cybermen who died out, and the reasons of why are unexplained. They enter the Telos city, which appears dead at first, But the resting place of the Cybermen is the interest, especially to Eric Klieg and Captain, two very sinister characters who have their own plans. What I really love about Tomb of the Cybermen is his unpredictability of who's going to die. That is something I really like in the story. Of course, the main characters are fine. But when you don't know, and you have this apprehension, you don't know when a supporting character is going to die, how, that's an indication of really strong writing. But also you need to back that up with the atmosphere and the plot of the story and its adversary. And it all comes together exceptionally well, of course. Klieg is an absolute insane lunatic. He's insane. And he shows that side to him pretty quickly. Subtle hints at the beginning. Absolutely loved his involvement. Captain didn't really try to put Klieg on the right path with their plans, but they didn't really think it out too well and what the Cybermen are all about. As indicated by the poll, Tomb of the Cybermen won pretty convincingly compared to the other stories, with the Tomb of the Cybermen at 52%, the Moonbase at 11%, the Wheel in Space with a sad 2%, and the Invasion with 34%. And to share some comments on other people's opinions, first comment is by Ryan Carrick. I like Tomb, but I don't think it's as good as some people say. I really like the Invasion and would prefer it as an overall story, but I feel like the Moonbase is a better Cyberman story. That is a subjective opinion, and some people will have that. Clearly I do as well, because you're yet to see the Invasion and the Moonbase. So yeah, I do share that opinion. I wouldn't say the Tomb of the Cybermen is overrated, but I do think the Moonbase and the Invasion are better stories. And second comment is by Dragon Bugs. This is a really tough vote. I absolutely adore the Moonbase, Tomb and the Invasion, and I think the Moonbase is quite a creepy story for the Cybermen. But personally, Tomb is my favourite overall, because Tomb has some great concepts of driving factors, e.g. the tombs. Plus, I think the Tomb side characters are great in my opinion. Everyone feels like they have a distinct feel of personality, from the want-to-be American hero to the overly cautious and nervous archaeologist. And then you've got members of the group who are corrupted by money and power and manipulate their way to the Cybermen with some help from Troughton in the background. Just for the Cybermen to try and manipulate, destroy them throughout, showing different levels of villainy. That's a very good depiction of why Tomb of the Cybermen is so great, because you have corrupted and malicious human characters, but they are oblivious and completely ignorant to the Cybermen, who have no emotions, they cannot be bargained or negotiated with, and they're just going to use you. So Klieg and the Cybermen are similar in one way, that they don't care for anyone else besides themselves. But the Cybermen are much more effective at it, because Klieg is completely ignorant to the fact that he can't really control the Cybermen. What, he thinks he can use a gun? It won't work. So his power ends up just being delusional. So yes, that's a good point of why... That's a really good point of why Tomb can be potentially better than the Moonbase. That makes me come to that conclusion. And maybe even the Invasion as well. That might be a little bit of a stretch though for me. But I still think it's the third best Cyberman story from the Second Doctor era. But yeah, Tomb of the Cybermen, fantastic Second Doctor episode. Everyone needs to experience it and watch it, 100%. Number 8, it's the sister Yeti story. Miles better than the original. It's the Web of Fear. I did say the Abominable Snowmen is better for the Great Intelligence. That might be a minority opinion, I don't know, but that's the only thing I prefer in the Abominable Snowmen compared to the Web of Fear. The Web of Fear is just the superior Yeti story. 100%. It's set in the London Underground, Travis is back, you have Lieutenant Stewart, the atmosphere, its creepy set design, and so on. It's always been the superior, even when it was missing. Some might say otherwise, but that's fine. But the general consensus is the Web of Fear is the superior Yeti story and one of the best classic Doctor Who stories from the Second Doctor era. The popularity is huge, for good reason. Episode 1 is an awesome introduction with some great characters. The Great Intelligence suspends the TARDIS in space, and the whole of London has been evacuated by the Yeti's presence. Could well be the contender for the best black and white atmospheric story. Best story atmospheric wise because it works in black and white because it's in the underground. So if they end up colorizing these episodes, would it work for the Web of Fear? I personally say it would detract the atmosphere. Not that I have anything against colorizing black and white episodes, there's a practicality at the end of the day why they did it. But would it work with the Web of Fear? I say no. Web of Fear wastes very little time revealing the Yeti's presence and the operation in London Underground. Some stories like to take their time, or take too long, or wait until the cliffhanger. With the Web of Fear, nope. Straight into the action, straight away. The pacing is brilliant and the Yeti themselves are much more action oriented than the Abominable Snowmen, using ambush techniques, disabling explosives and using web guns. Episode 3 is missing, which I would personally say is the weakest episode. I know it reveals Lieutenant Stewart. I think it is the weakest episode out of the Web of Fear. If episode 4 was taken, that would be dreadful because that Yeti battle, sublime. But the Great Intelligence is still creepy in this story, and speaking through them with their voice. That's still a scary premise, and it does it a lot. Never truly reveals itself. With the Abominable Snowmen, it's kind of indicated that the intelligence did reveal itself through Padma Salvazar. As indicated by the poll, the Web of Fear won by an onslaught, 72% compared to its bigger brother story. It was just complete domination, which doesn't surprise me because it's an extremely popular opinion. And to read some comments of opinions of the 2 Ice Warrior stories and the 2 Yeti stories, to which one is best, we have Icy Slavcat. I love the Web of Fear because of how atmospheric it is. You're just unsettled from the outset, and they do a really good job of keeping a secret of who's working for the Great Intelligence. Plus we get the first ever appearance of the best character, Colonel Alistair Gordon Lethbridge Stewart, and a very well paced compared to the other 3. Yeah, I would say the Abominable Snowmen does have some pacing issues in the middle. After episode 4, it does go down a little bit with episode 5, just calms things down a little bit, I will admit. But I wouldn't say it has pacing problems. And next comment we have from Alex McDowell. I really like 4 of these stories, but it's got to be the Web of Fear for me. It just does everything right in my opinion. Atmosphere is incredible, very well paced for a 6-parter, memorable supporting cast and characters, even gives us the first appearance of the Brigadier. Or the Colonel, can't beat it. No, it's definitely the best story out of the 4, and the majority, like over 90%, will probably say that. The final end of the Daleks. It is the evil of the Daleks. Now there is a constant and quite a big debate of what is the best Second Doctor Dalek story. Power of the Daleks or Evil of the Daleks, and by referencing the poll I did, it was a pretty damn close contest. It's really, it could be 50-50. Whoever takes part in the poll. It's just a tough question to ask, and both of them are highly regarded as classics. I've heard both parties say that they're overrated. Some people say Power's overrated. Some people say Evil the Daleks is overrated. But that's the thing, not everyone's gonna like a classic. The Daleks have brought a new master plan to conquer the universe, and they require the Doctor himself. The TARDIS has been stolen during the events of the Faceless Ones. We got some fantastic supporting characters in the story, like Edward Waterfield, a fantastic acting with the actor, is legitimately terrified of the Daleks. The Daleks feel that they have their grip and power over have their grip on people. The Daleks in Evil the Daleks are terrifying and creepy in a different way compared to Power. Power is with their manipulation, creating a false sense of security to win favour and get what they want. That's Power of the Daleks. Evil of the Daleks, however, is that they have total power and influence over their servants, who are needed for this master plan. Edward, Victoria, the Doctor feel helpless and scared of their ruthlessness and control to force Edward to obey. You see a broken man who's washed away, who has no autonomy. Episode 1 leaves the viewer in an ambiguity as to why the TARDIS was stolen. The Daleks want the Doctor, and not just to simply exterminate him. To see the Doctor without the TARDIS almost is a loss of identity to him. Power and Evil are depictions of the Daleks in a very creepy and ruthless way, but just done differently. And it's just subjective of which one you think is more ruthless and terrifying. Now, you could obviously... Now, I can say this straight away. I prefer Power of the Daleks to Evil of the Daleks. I think Power is more structured well compared to Evil of the Daleks. Evil of the Daleks 100% has pacing issues in the middle portion. Like episode 3 to 5. It's that middle section where Jamie's pretty much wandering the mansion trying to save Victoria, which does take far too long, 100%. So it does detract from the rating. So I wouldn't really give it a 9.5. I would personally go down a bit and give it a 9.25. And to go over some comments with difference of opinion, we have the Snowflake, who says, with Power of the Daleks, I really do like episode 1, where the second Doctor is getting used to his regeneration. Also the huge body count towards the end. Evil, on the other hand, I think the voices are so good episodes. Personally, I think the Daleks are doing Evil of the Daleks is more interesting compared to Power of the Daleks. And next comment we have from Elliot Smith, Power is slightly better for me. Evil has a bit more filler, where Jamie is walking around corridors for like a whole episode. Both classics though. Yeah, absolutely. Evil is definitely more padded compared to Power of the Daleks. Even if Power was the 7th-parter, I doubt there would be any padding within the story. So it's extremely subjective which Dalek story from the Second Doctor era is your favourite. Personally for me, I prefer Power a lot more. I prefer the story, I prefer the plot. The Daleks are, in my opinion, more terrifying, but that's extremely subjective because both of them are quite terrifying. The build-up between episode 1 to 6 is fantastic in Power of the Daleks, but then again, you have the Emperor Dalek in Evil of the Daleks. So it could be a very tough call to say which one's your best Dalek story. It's a tough one to figure out, but for me, it is Power of the Daleks, which we'll get to fairly soon. Some of the best Doctor Who stories of all time in my opinion, but number 6, I was a little bit worried about the animation. I was looking at it on YouTube, the trailer, these wide shots, I was concerned which would heavily detract the atmosphere of the story. Like Macra Terror, it's surprisingly, well actually I'll say surprisingly, it works very well on audio, and that wasn't the original intention, of course, because they weren't supposed to be audios, but it still worked very well as a BBC radio audio. That is Fury from the Deep. Yeah, I was very concerned about the animation, but I actually fairly enjoyed it. I think they did well in scenes where they did capture the atmosphere. Then again, I think some rooms within the atmosphere did detract the animation a little bit. But then again, it's the same animation team as the Abominable Snowmen with these overly wide and big empty shots of space. So that's just a little nitpick I have with the animation's direction personally, but it was still very good. So I think my fears were personally not justified. So it was fairly good, the animation. Fury from the Deep is another contender to perhaps being one of the most atmospheric stories. I don't think it personally beats Web of Fear for me, but it's close. It's very close. The Doctor, Victoria and Jamie yet again land on the planet Earth in England, near the coast of a refinery plant called Esco that controls rigs out at sea. They examine the pipelines to hear a peculiar sound of a pulsating heartbeat, an unnatural sound coming from the pipes. They are expected to be saboteurs. The Doctor testifies to the noise to no avail. Controlled by a man named Robson, a very stubborn, arrogant man who never takes the opinions and concerns of anybody and brushes them off like nothing at all. Both with Van Lutyens, who is concerned about crew morale, with the rig suddenly going down under, and Harris, who has made calculations about what's happening and isn't a simple pipe or gauge malfunction, but a peculiar blockage, and other rigs talking about the same noise. The characterization of Robson is really, really good. His stubbornness and arrogance to not believe the seaweed threat puts this level of unpredictability in the story, because you're telling to yourself, is he really just this stubborn, arrogant man? Or does the seaweed already have psychological influence over him? So I'm going back and forward with this character of, is he just a stubborn man, or is he actually being influenced? I would say Fury from the Deep has some of the best supporting character performances in any Doctor Who story. The performances, it's a shame we don't actually experience the real tape, but really good performances and very authentic, especially when you sympathize with Harris, who is, his wife is infected by the seaweed, and just the interactions of a concerned man and an elitist, corporate, arrogant controller of Robson, who is very conceited and just doesn't respect the opinions and lives of others. Just work, 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 do this, do that, keep those refineries running at all cost. In episode 3, some of the best performances, especially from Robson, who goes crazed by everyone concerned about the operation collapsing. And again, just a great cliffhanger, yeah, again, very bone-chilling. And the fate of Harris's wife, wow, that is tragic. That is dark for Doctor Who. The Fury from the Deep, an absolute classic. This is not my favourite Cyberman story. This is my favourite Cyberman depicted story. It's my favourite depiction of the Cybermen. That is the Moonbase. Now, there are aspects of Tomb of the Cybermen which are better than the Moonbase. I would say the supporting characters are better in Tomb, and the character drama and situations and what happens is more shocking to the system than the Moonbase. But why I put the Moonbase above Tomb is for the Cybermen themselves, the depiction of the Cybermen. This is my favourite depiction of the Cybermen. Black and white space horror. They mock humans and their emotions, which is something which I just don't see anymore. I think the Cybermen mocking like the concept of emotions and the human experience as just inferior. I just love that aspect of the Cybermen, and we only really saw that in the Moonbase, parts of the 10th planet. I think there was maybe a little bit in Tomb of the Cybermen, but that was it. It was over then. And yes, the Moonbase is my favourite animation out of all Doctor Who animated releases, by far my favourite. The Moonbase in 2070 is designed as a weather control system to harness influence over the Earth's weather to prevent weather catastrophes harming human life. The Cybermen want to do something with this technology, but the Cybermen just don't go in guns blazing. They use, as I said, hiding behind the shadows and pick them off one by one to likely avoid casualties. And just witnessing a Cyberman staring at Jamie, just making just this blank, emotionless stare, is just awesome. And another favourite scene is the Doctor's realisation of understanding the Cyberman's plot, which is poisoning its crew. I would say this is the first Second Doctor story where his era got on track. Still, Power the Daleks was incredible, but Highlanders, he was having an identity crisis. The writers didn't know what to do with him. And Underwater Menace was kind of trash. But Moonbase, it finally gets things rolling. Power was just the lucky beginning that it just succeeded extremely well for me. But yeah, this is my favourite representation of the Cybermen, my favourite depiction. As I stated, they use the environment to their advantage, they outwit their opposition, and the Cybermen respond to really callous but basic lines to just mock human beings, saying it was all really simple, only a stupid Earth brain can fall for it. Revenge, what is that? No, we're here to eliminate all dangers. Their one-liners were spot on, perfect. And Polly actually gets something to do and acts in an offensive capability to thwart the Cybermen and deal with them. I personally say it's underrated. Most people would not put the Moonbase nowhere near, and heavens above, not above, Tomb of the Cybermen, but personally for me, it's my favourite depiction of the Cybermen. Not my favourite Cyberman story, because we have yet to see that on the listing. So yeah, number 5 belongs to the underrated Moonbase. The staple of like the Daleks master plan, Power the Daleks, Evil the Daleks, Fury from the Deep, Marco Polo. It didn't have that title or that popularity when it was missing. Then when it was recovered, everyone freaking loves it. And I see more people like the story more than the Web of Fear, and that was popular even when it was missing. And yes, I do prefer Enemy of the World to the Web of Fear. The Enemy of the World takes a more unconventional approach to the Second Doctor era, going for a James Bond Earthbound. This is a real test of Patrick Troughton's acting performances. He is playing the Doctor, he's playing Salamander, and he's also playing Salamander, and he's also playing the Doctor pretending to be Salamander, which is a you can see a little key differences when the Doctor's playing Salamander or when Salamander's playing Salamander, if that makes... Oh, that sounds weird in my head. Yeah, Patrick Troughton goes for a multifaceted approach to his acting performances. But yes, this is a test of Patrick Troughton's awesome acting performances. An engaging opening episode where we see a autocratic dictator, Salamander, who wants to... one of these politicians who wants to save the world. But others want to thwart his plans because he's trying to destroy the world. There's a lot of backstabbing in the story. You don't know who's friend or foe. Some people on Salamander's side aren't necessarily foes. There are some on the Doctor's side which are not necessarily good people and have ulterior motives that they wish to do. So yeah, Salamander seems to be awfully aware of when volcanic eruptions are to happen, and this is his plan. He's been using oblivious, ignorant people trapped in a vault underground to create natural disasters, and this is his method of assuming control of territory and being the savior of these locations that have been destroyed by disasters that he has created behind the scenes. So his method of annexing territory is devilish. It's beyond evil. So you really go to show, is this really a kid's show? No, it really isn't in some of its themes. And why I like the Second Doctor era a lot. There is some dark stories in the Second Doctor era and some dark moments within those stories. Again, you generally feel for the people just trapped in the vault, just blindly going with Salamander's orders. One of them only finds out the truth where a newspaper reveals the date of publication and what's happening on Earth. Would they have holiday trips in the middle of a ruthless, bleak nuclear war? No, they probably wouldn't. One of my favourite moments is the standoff between Giles Kent and Salamander, two equally evil, politically, characters. And yeah, it goes to show that you don't really know the loyalty of some of these characters, and you don't know love really strong supporting characters. Enemy of the World, one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time. This is the Daleks' master plan for Cybermen, an 8-part Earthbound story, and we have the brilliant, one of my favourite actors of all time, Kevin Stoney, playing Tobias Vaughan. But yes, I don't love this story for the Cybermen, I love this story for Tobias Vaughan. And yes, he does overshadow the Cybermen quite a lot. So even if I rank the invasion over the Moonbase and Tomb, if I was talking about depiction of the Cybermen, I would then rate, or I would put the Moonbase and Tomb over the invasion, only by strictly talking about the Cybermen only, not the story overall. So we got some brilliant things in this story. The Tobias Vaughan, the return of Lethbridge Stewart, now Brigadier, the introduction of Unit, which we of course see in the Third Doctor era. This is a prototype story of what is to come in the Third Doctor season, especially like season 7. And I would love to see episode 1 and 4. I think they're the most underrated Doctor Who episodes to see back in the archives. People kind of forget about it because it's already been released on DVD, so people forget about those missing episodes, but I would love to see them. Tobias Vaughan is a very charming, well-mannered man on the outside, but in the inside, ruthless, evil, malicious man. You definitely feel this very sinister, inhuman feeling about him. And dare I say, I prefer Tobias Vaughan than Malvik Chen. In my opinion, I think he's just a little bit more multifaceted. Tobias Vaughan, much more interesting and in-depth as a character. But still, it's Kevin Stoney. He's freaking awesome. Tobias Vaughan isn't threatened by the Cybermen. He is definitely consumed by power. And he has all the talking points of what all the dictators say. They say they need a strong leader to create unity, focus, and strength. The lines of a crazed autocrat. And when he gets control of the infrastructure of Earth, he is then going to destroy the Cybermen with emotion fear guns. But yeah, I'll come out and say it, Tobias Vaughan is my favourite villain to feature in the Second Doctor era. I rate him over the War Chief in the War Games, just as a character, Salamander as well. He's just my favourite because he's just so inhuman and sinister, and again, he's one of my favourite actors. I love how he also manipulates Watkins into shooting him, which again is one of my favourite scenes in the show's history, because again, it's so sinister and inhuman of him, and then he's laughing when he's shot, because most of his body is cybernetic. One of the best Doctor Who stories yet again. I'm going to say it with 3, 2, and 1. It's one of the best. 100% would be in my top 20. Yeah, 100%. That's no question whatsoever. It's a brilliant 8-part epic Doctor Who Second Doctor story. You definitely have to watch it. Get it on DVD. Just watch it. If you've been paying attention, you know what's left. It's Power of the Daleks and the War Games. That is what's left in this ranking video. Yeah, both these stories I rate a 10 out of 10. They are sublime. And if Power actually existed, it could even be the contender to be the top dog. I don't know. But these two stories are, without question, the best of the best when it comes to Doctor Who. But number 2 on the list is, in fact, Power of the Daleks. Without question, my favourite Dalek episode of all time. I've always, even back in the day with the inception of my channel, I have always put Power of the Daleks in extreme high praise. For the animation, on audio, reconstruction, it's my favourite Dalek story and the depiction of them. Even when it's just using different methods of just simply exterminating. I know that's their thing, that's their gist. I know that's their thing and their method. But I love to see when Daleks are not even have any offensive weaponry, no offensive capabilities, take over an entire colony by basically acting as servants, manipulating the colony, and using false sense of security while also subtly referencing that they are taken over. And people like Lesterson, Bragan, and Vulcan as a society as a whole, I'm not seeing it. If this was recovered, I would lose my shit. Because it's one of the very, very few stories which rivals the top dog, the top placement. So, yeah. And there isn't a lot of stories which rival number 1. It just isn't. But Power of the Daleks, it does. And even though I rated the Aztecs a 10 out of 10, I wouldn't put the Aztecs near power whatsoever. Absolutely not. That if the Aztecs is a 10 out of 10, then Power of the Daleks breaks the rating system. So the Doctor, Polly and Ben land on the planet Vulcan, where an Earth Examiner is shot and killed, with the Doctor walking into a situation and playing the part of an Examiner. We don't know why or who sent for one, and why the Examiner was killed to impede on this examination to take place. I love the supporting characters. We have Hansel, the governor of the colony, who seems to be out of the loop of why an Examiner was sent in the first place. Bragan, head of security, who seems trepidatious of the Doctor's involvement and has political goals. Quinn, who is looking for answers, and Lesterson, who is the one to locate the Dalek capsule buried in Vulcan for centuries. And Jane Lee, an assistant of Lesterson and a member of the rebel group, working undercover, as Hensel does talk about a rebel group inside the colony of Vulcan. Lots of mystery in episode 1 and good build up of the characters, but Power only gets stronger by each episode after. That's why Power is so freaking good to me. After every episode, the Daleks slowly get more influence, more power, and slowly take over. And the one you really feel sorry for is Lesterson, who is even blackmailed by his own assistant Jane Lee to carry on with the Dalek experiments, even when it was to a point where he didn't want to do it anymore. And Lesterson is probably my favourite supporting character in the story. You can see he's not pushed by politics. He just cares about the end goal of the functionality of the colony and how it can be improved scientifically. And some fantastic twists and turns with characters and who's part of the rebel group and who isn't, and who's orchestrating, impeding the Examiner. Why is Bragan doing that? And why did Quinn send for one in the first place? What's his whole point, and why is he doing that? And again, seeing the Daleks being built from the capsule spaceship, and Lesterson slowly losing in his mind. My goodness, would I love to see that on film. It's sad, it is, because it's the episode I want to see the most recovered. I do love the line from the Daleks saying, "Why do human beings kill human beings?" Trying to understand human beings have differences of allegiance, political goals, opposing ideologies and self-interests, while the Daleks have a collective ideology of killing and exterminating everything, but doesn't have the Dalek ideals. So they're basically two extremes. It's such good writing. You have the extreme end of humanity, where it's opposing ideals and ideologies creates conflict and wars. And then we have the Daleks, which is just an evil collective movement of superior beings which only serve one collective goal, and no opposing ideology. They all think the same, the Daleks. So you have two extremes, both representing as the Daleks, and then the other representing Bragan. Yeah, number 2 belongs to Power of the Daleks. If it was recovered, it would probably put the War Games in a tussle, in a little bit of fight to see if it matches up, because it's different when the episodes are recovered and you see them as they were originally intended. It's a different ball game. And we have number 1. Is it a damn surprise? It's the War Games. The War Games, to me, is the best Doctor Who story ever, in my opinion. Number 1. And one of the best black and white pieces of television ever produced. 'It's. It's. 'It's. 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 ' Does the War Games have its faults? Yeah, of course it does. Every single story has its faults, and I will briefly go over them quickly. I think some scenes could have been reshot. Sometimes they look a little janky. And in episode 3 and 4, maybe just a slight little bit stagnant. Only slightly. But the rest of it is just solid perfection. I'm only gonna go through number 1 quickly, because its anniversary is coming up soon. It was originally broadcasted in the 19th of April 1969. So I will have a dedicated video just specifically talking about the War Games. It was almost like a review / documentary of it. So that'll be coming. So I'm not going to say too much. Basic premise of the War Games is the Doctor, Jamie and Zoe land in no man's land in the brink of World War I, one of the bloodiest periods of history. But we see it's not that all meets the eye. They are actually on an unidentified planet where the warlords have put together different time zones of Earth's history and battles to find the best soldiers possible for their army and empire. The characters are so fantastic, and the build-up of threat just goes up and up and up. First it's General Smythe, then we have Von Way, the War Chief makes his appearance. So like the hierarchy of it is Smythe and Von Way are like overseers of time zones. The War Chief is the acting chief, the commander of the operation. We have the security chief, who has a lot of hatred and distrust of the War Chief because he's a Time Lord. He operates security. And then the Warlord himself, who is the leader of the Warlords. So the build-up of foe just goes up and up and up and up to see that chain of command, to see the higher power slowly reveal itself. And how the higher power reveals itself is just fantastic writing. First we see General Smythe talk to an alien screen, which indicates that not all meets the eye. They might not even be in World War I, which they ain't. We can see General Smythe and Von Way have psychological influence by putting on their glasses or spectacle, or their monocle, which is such an awesome feature. I always love that when that happens. Comparing the Dominators to the hatred and animosity between the War Chief and the Security Chief is just night and day difference. Here it's very real, and the emotions tied into it just makes sense compared to the Dominators. It's just not even comparable. I would say the War Chief and the Security Chief had more development than the Warlord. But then again, he appeared quite late within the story. I think episode 7, he kind of, like 6 or 7, he made his way in. Very dark. And I like how episode 1's cliffhanger kind of alludes what happens to the Second Doctor in the end of his era. Yeah, basically the Second Doctor was... that's what basically happened to him. He was executed. So, honestly, that's why I'm not the biggest fan of Season 6B. Because it continues... is like the Second Doctor's stories, which you might think, really? Do you think that, Tom? Yeah, I do, because it kind of detracts that whole scene where it's alluded that he basically was executed as the Second Doctor, forced to regenerate into the Third Doctor. And by looking at previous stories, the worst thing you can do to the Doctor is exile him in one period on one planet in one period of time. That's like purgatory for the Doctor, or solitary confinement. I like how also the Warlord soldiers are basically like stormtroopers from Star Wars. They are useless drones, but that adds like a comical side. And yep, that's it. We are done with the list. War Games, the best Doctor Who story in my opinion, with a close... Power of the Daleks is close at number 2, and then we have The Invasion at number 3 for my top 3. With Enemy of the World at number 4, and maybe quite surprisingly the Moonbase at number 5. But yeah, the Second Doctor era gets a 9 out of 10 overall for me. It's my favourite era of the show, and it was a joy to experience the era again. I'm kind of glad I don't have to ever go to Daily Motion ever again to experience the reconstructions. I am happy that is done and dealt with. I'm also kind of glad I don't have to experience the Space Pirates anymore. Maybe if they recover it, that'll be different. Yeah, thanks for watching this ranking video of the Patrick Troughton Second Doctor era. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's been long in the works. It's been about 3 or 4 months since the first Doctor installment came out, so I hope the wait was worth it. Thank you very much for watching this video, and of course, have a good one.